Both C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien were occultists, and they were what we would call light side, but still deceptions nonetheless. The Christian church genre, if you want to put it like that, the ethos of Christianity at this point is so highly infested with occultists. If they're a popular church, the likelihood of the pastor or the entire worship team, the likelihood of them not being touched by the occult or directly in it is pretty low.
Welcome to Testimony Mountain. So glad you're here, and I'm really grateful for Veronica Swift is here with us today. And we've been kind of chatting about some things already and having a hard time containing ourselves, but we'll get to that in a minute. So just want to give Veronica a chance to share about where people can connect with her material.
Hi, Adena. It's nice to be back with you today. Yeah, I'm a little bit crazy this morning. So we're going to have fun, I think. So I have a website, veronicaswift.blog, B-L-O-G, and that has all of my writing for the past 5 years on it. And you can access that for $26 a month, or sorry, a year. And then I also write on Substack. I do free things on Wednesdays most of the time. And that's veronicaswiftblog.substack.com. But interestingly, the new online Safety Act in the UK and the upcoming Australian Minors Act are putting a lot of squeeze on, especially the Substack posts. So a lot of them are going under age restriction. And so your best bet is probably, if you want to see everything, to go to my website, because you can get it all there. A mirror the stuff that's on Substack over on my website. And then I have a locals community, which is where you can ask questions and share stuff and see other things that I don't post as long form blogs. And that's veronicaswift.locals.com. So that's where you can find me.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we were just kind of chatting about what do we do? It seems like there's so much occult symbolism in almost everything. And so it's a big challenge to know how to walk it out, because it's in books, magazines, all over social media, in the movies and TV, on YouTube, and every kind of media you can imagine. And it's almost like, where do you go? What do you do? How can you even just have an enjoyable evening with something that doesn't have the occult right in your face? And so we'll kind of start there as a launching place and see where we go.
Yeah. So I started out, I don't know if it was maybe 2 months ago at this point, I thought I need to do something fun. It's been 5 years. I've done this writing and learning and exploring for 5 years now. And I've kind of shoved everything else aside in my life that I used to really enjoy doing and spent most of my time doing. And I'm I've got my nose above water at this point and feeling like I have a fair grasp on a bit of it. I kind of don't know where to go next in terms of writing about certain topics. So I'm exploring a lot of different areas, and I thought, boy, wouldn't it be fun just to read a book for pleasure, just to have some fun, or watch a film, which I haven't done in a long time. I don't own a television. I don't watch TV. Once in a blue moon, I'll pull up a YouTube video or something for fun. So I started watching this series that I had not wanted to watch, but I was really bored. But it was from a book series that I had read many moons ago, and I really enjoyed at the time. And I was blown away and astonished by the amount of occult symbolism in it. And not only that, then I went back to the books again because I thought, wow, I wonder if the film version just inserted a lot of extra stuff. Like they made changes, because I don't remember any of this from when I had read the book. Well, there's this principle that your mind skips over words that it doesn't recognize, so you're not likely to see them in a book or on the in print, unless you trained yourself to kind of hone in on them and go to the dictionary. And I thought, well, maybe my brain did the exact same thing with all of this occult stuff in the book. So I went back to the book, and there's a number of different places you can actually download books for free online. So I downloaded the first couple of volumes of this series and I was reading them. And lo and behold, maybe not as much as the film, but in the book was a ton of occult references that I just had not caught at all when I read it the first time. And so I'm going through this and I'm starting to feel a little more depressed and a little more upset the further I read and the more I find. And then I find this reference to a grimoire of the Count de Saint Germain in this book. And I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. I know I missed that the first time. I know I had no idea at that point what a grimoire was, much less who the Count de Saint Germain is. Um, and then I got mad and I thought, I can't even read a book for fun anymore. I pick up other books and there's reference after reference after reference. So I tried a couple more books and I thought, this is I have never in the 5 years that I've spent researching the occult and learning about it, I've never felt depressed about it. You go through a period of grief in the beginning when you learn about all the heinous things they do, but eventually you get over it. And after you get over that hump, it becomes a little more analytical than it does purely emotional and purely gripping and heartbreaking like it is in the beginning. But lately, in realizing that I can't even read a book for pleasure, that kind of made me a little depressed. I thought, gosh, that used to be one of the primary ways that I escaped the world and I got a little bit of enjoyment out of life. And since I'm not a huge TV person or film person, that was, that's kind of the thing that I really enjoyed doing. And actually, I took a vacation a couple months ago and I was at a friend's house. They had the whole entire Hunger Games series there. I read those. I didn't even find reading those because I think I knew that this is something the occult did. I didn't find reading those necessarily depressing, but I do find going back to books that ought to be enjoyable and free of the occult. I found that to be really a downer. I thought, gosh. And then I got to thinking about it, not to lift myself up, but apparently to make myself even more depressed than I was before. I thought, I've shunned going. Now that I know what the national parks are about,
Yes.
I don't want to go to those either. And I used to love to go to national parks or even state parks. Now I'm kind of I'm wary of them. I'm wary of hiking trails. I'm wary of museums. I don't want to go to museums. I don't want to go, do things like the Smithsonian and big ones. I used to where I went to school, there were a lot of museums surrounding the school. I used to do those every once in a while. I wouldn't want to do that again now, and I wouldn't want to go to Disneyland or Disney World or any amusement parks. And so I'm thinking, gosh, my life has really shrunk. I feel like it's shrunk. I feel like I'm deliberately avoidant, and I don't think that can go on forever. So I'm thinking probably I'm not alone in feeling that way after, there are a lot of people who have been on this journey along with me who have followed my writing and have learned along with me since the beginning. Some know more, some know less. But I'm supposing that probably many of us have gotten to this point where what do you do now when you know a little bit too much, maybe?
Yes. Yes.
How do you recover from that? Because I that's the point I'm at. Like I am not really sure how to how to recover from it.
Yes. And I can so relate, Veronica, because even I can't remember, someone referenced um, a book that someone did about Little House on the Prairie books, which I grew up on. And you got to go, hey, that has to be the purest of the pure. And then they were documenting, uh, Charles and Carolyn's and Laura's journey in Freemasonry. And,
Yeah.
and again, it was
Right.
just like, come on, what is out there? And we add on to that, about C.S. Lewis, and also for me, I've become more aware of Ted Dekker. I absolutely really enjoyed his books. Now, some of them were dark and, looking back now, very occultic. But they had like spiritual themes, and there were some that were the writing was so creative and so good, and the series black, red, white, green, I think is the each one of them had a different color, which is kind of interesting now that I understand more about color programming.
Mm,
But it was, looking back at it, it was all about a virus and a vaccine that affected the whole world, and that was
huh,
back in the 2000s, I think, or maybe earlier than that, that those came out. And
yeah,
like you said, it's so discouraging because it's like we loved some of these authors, and it's like, and especially the ones who we believe were Christian, it's like, well, this has got to be good, this is a Christian person. So but again, this is the infiltration of the cult into every uh, layer of society and every structure.
yeah. I remember when I was looking into the Fritz Springmeier's
Mhm.
example of the Boston Tea Party and discovering that, the Masonic temple's above the Green Dragon Tavern
Yeah,
in Boston, and that's where they met. And just thinking, oh man, there is no corner that has been untouched. And I could, probably you could probably find thousands and thousands of examples. This very same book and film series that I am reading, talks extensively about the Sons of Liberty, which is an occult group that was part of the American Revolution. And, and the main character turns out to have been a Freemason. I'm like, ay, 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 ay.
yeah. And it was interesting too. I was writing a book last year, which I haven't finished yet, but um, in the process of writing, there were parts of me who came forward who talked about their job in the cult of writing. Now, the particular genre that they said I wrote was technical writing. I have friends who were used in Disney in writing scripts. And, you think about technical writing, at least my understanding of it, that's just like, you know, technical stuff. It's like how would there be occult stuff in there? But there were specific rituals and things that were done, and literal curses that we, would put in the writing. And I don't really know fully how to describe it. But this is the challenge: is there's the obvious things like the cult symbolism or names or things like that. But then also you have uh, this overlay, this frequency, I don't know what you want to call it, that is cult. And that actually may be more dangerous than, the more obvious things. And what I want to say, however, is that we can get so discouraged about all of this and go, well, I'm never picking up another book. I'm not watching another show, any of those kinds of things. Is that I do believe the power of true Jesus Christ is stronger. And so it was kind of interesting because a couple of years ago, my daughter, who's not a believer and has walked away and all of that, um, and she felt like we didn't have a lot to talk about, and so she wanted to meet weekly for a book club, just phone calls. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. And then um, she picked some books that I would not normally read. And so I was kind of wrestling with the Lord about it because I'm like, I can imagine this has cold stuff in it, even if it's not overt. It's, I'm sure it's going to. And it was interesting because he just said, just pray over it with the blood of Jesus, and, engage this with your daughter and pray it over her as well. And so, you know, to me, it's one of those things when we get into the place of black and white, like I can never do this or I can never do that, we get into rigidity and we tend to swing, to extremes. Um, Now, I don't think that this is just a blanket endorsement to go, oh, if you just pray over that show or that TV or that book, it's fine.
Hmm.
I think that's dangerous too. And so it's about a relational connection with the true Lord Jesus and walking it out step by step with Him, saying, you know, can I read this? Should I read this? Are there consequences to reading this? Can you
Yeah.
cover me as I read this or watch this? And then the other part of that is just what if we went back to the old fashioned? What did people do in the old days before
Yeah.
they had all of this, you know? And
Yeah.
so that's a little bit more challenging, especially for those who are like us, maybe a little more avoidant. Um, but to go, okay, well, sit around the campfire and, I don't know. But I do believe there are refreshing ways to enjoy our hours that don't have to be tied into the cult. So,
Yeah. So many good points there. Um, I think I completely agree with you that Jesus can cover all of this for us. And we're not here to have our existence be obliterated by the occult just by walking in the world.
yeah,
At the same time, you have this, I have this feeling like, I, I, I want to exert a little bit of my will, maybe not give up complete control by saying no. Is that not a good thing? So yeah, to know, it's hard to relinquish control and say, he's got it.
yeah,
I'm good. And there's that frustration. Man, I just wish I could have a little bit more influence.
yes. I would say that also, just because something is Christian doesn't mean anything necessarily. So, and again, this may be stepping on toes, but like the Chosen series that I know many people loved, and at first I did too, until I understood that the main character who plays Jesus, who he really is, and uh, it's one of those things where even though the content may be good, um, he may be signaling uh, survivors. And there may also be an end time agenda. So what if the Antichrist looks very much like, him?
Yeah.
Things like this that, I just encourage people to be aware of. And one of the episodes in the first series I really enjoyed at first, and it was about Jesus and the children. But later on, when I looked back on it, it was like, okay, here's a single man, and in every scene, there are no other adults present.
Oh.
It's only the kids.
Wow.
And so, shows the kids with the parents, but then they go off and be with Jesus alone. And
Mm,
there's no other adults. And I was just reading recently in one of Jim Wilder's books about how that's one of the big danger signs is that isolation. So if um, a male is off and isolating and does and is interested in children, you better run. Um, on the other hand, there can be, and we need um, supplemental parents out there, but they better be involved in a lot of life and have a lot of accountability before allowing him, near our children. And so it's just interesting, some of these very, very subtle things that, when you just look on the surface, it's like, wow, this is so sweet. And Jesus is interacting in such beautiful ways with the kids and all of that.
mm,
But you
yeah.
look at it a little more closely and you go, oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it reminds me of Harry Potter series. The first thing they do is take the kids away from the parents and shuffle them off to boarding school, and then it's indoctrination central.
Yeah, definitely.
Those books were also delightful well, most of them. I didn't like the last book very much, but the first one was very, very engaging.
Yeah.
And looking back on them and now understanding that some of the spells in them were are actual spells is rather horrifying.
Yeah. And I was at a retreat last year, and it was one of those things where, here is some Christian leaders. She was actually a children's pastor and worship leader of a church I know. And she was just championing, the Harry Potter and all of the, spiritual symbolism in there, and, comparing it to the Bible, and that, every Christian
Oh,
should read Harry Potter. And, I was just like dumbfounded.
yeah.
Um, and finally, had the courage to say something, to say, from a survivor perspective, that's probably not a good idea. And she immediately backpedaled. But in the same conversation, there was another, Christian leader that was talking about how they really wanted to uh, go to Club 33 at Disneyland or whatever,
Mm,
World or whatever. And I was like, you have no clue of what that really is. And but she was
yeah.
planning to go, and I'm like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
I just watched a short video by James Rink, who passed
mm,
just a few days ago. He's I don't know, the more common term is super soldier, but I'd say survivor of the secret space programs is probably a little more accurate. And he did an expose on Disneyland, had some footage from inside of it, and even just rewatching that, I think it might have been the Small World ride, or and he had a couple of shots of the what's the space? Is it it's Space
Space
Mountain
Mountain.
ride? Yeah. Um, and even looking back, and I'm like, wow, I see so much more in it than I did before, and it's just it's scary. It's right out there in front of everybody's eyes. Just like it is out there in the books, in front of everybody's eyes, in front of my eyes before, and we don't see it because there's no education about it.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's
I got
like it's a small world ride. How could you fault that? All
yeah,
about
yeah, yeah, yeah,
unity and learning about all the different. But it's one of those things where, as a kid, we went there, went on the ride, and bought the record, and I would listen to that over and over.
yeah, yeah,
And now listening to survivors' accounts and some of my own, about Disneyland, it's just like, oh my.
yeah. Horrific, horrendous, and despicable. Hmm. Yeah, so I don't know personally if I could ever step foot in Disneyland comfortably again.
Yeah,
Um,
that's been
but
a
at the same time, I have to, I do have to branch out and find some other ways to be in the world
yeah,
and feel comfortable doing it. I don't want to feel like every time I step foot on questionable soil, I'll put it that way, that I'm doing it. Uh, what do they say? Willing consent. I do not want to
yes,
give willing consent
yes,
just by stepping foot on a piece of ground that um, isn't good and maybe I don't know about.
yeah. Well, I was thankful that my kids have not invited me to go with them when they've gone. But
Mm,
that's one of those hard things to go. Should I go to keep a really close eye on my granddaughter,
right.
or should I not? And so again, I believe that we need to hear from, true Jesus each step of the way in these areas that are difficult. And I do believe that, again, the power of the true Lord Jesus is greater. But we also don't want to just walk, blissfully into the enemy's traps and, be like, oh, well, God will protect me. And a lot of Christians
Exactly.
do that,
Yeah.
and they get themselves into a lot of trouble because of not being aware.
Yeah. They get other people into trouble as well. I know I was asked in an interview that I did a number of months ago with James Delingpole about C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. And James is I believe he lives in London or thereabouts. So he's a British man and studied it at Oxford, I believe, studied C.S. Lewis. And I'm not really familiar with C.S. Lewis all that much, not his adult writings or his Christian writing, quote unquote Christian writings. So I did what I normally do, which if you don't know, if someone listening doesn't know, I focus on primary sources, people who have experienced what they've experienced. So I want to listen to what they say about their own lives. And I tend to try to shun secondary sources and tertiary sources I don't even pay any attention to. So primary sources are my go-to. I want to know what people say about what they know about what they've experienced. And just as a side note, I, I I don't know why more people don't do that, but I think I'm probably the only person that is currently doing that with the occult. It just makes sense to me. It makes more sense than collecting information from sources that heard it from somebody else. So I want to hear it from the people who experienced it. I want to know what their perceptions and their experiences were. Anyway, so I did so when he asked me that I said I really don't know. I'm not it's not something I've looked up, so I would have to go back and look it up. So after the interview was over, I went back and looked it up and found the sources that I was interested in what they said, and I compiled a little short article and I put it on Substack. And that basically what it says is that yes, both C.S. Lewis and J.R. Tolkien were occultists, and they were probably what we would call light side or non deep dark black magic individuals, but still involved in occult deceptions nonetheless. And this came from a number of different whistleblower primary source testimony. And I tend to believe people who say they've experienced what they've experienced. And I know that in the survivor, you can call it the survivor community, it's not really a cohesive group at this point, but the collective group of survivors that are talking publicly about their experiences in the occult, there were a number of them who said yes, both of these people are, and here's some information about them. So I wrote that as a post, and boy, did I get a lot of hatred. I got so much hatred. It prompted James to write an article about how much hatred I had gotten just for writing that article that I'd written. It's also the number one viewed article on my Substack. Has about, I don't know, 4,000 likes and hundreds of, or no, 4,000 views and
Yes.
hundreds of likes. So it was a popular one, but it created a firestorm of controversy. James also just put out he promoted someone else's article who was also writing about C.S. Lewis, and that prompted a flurry of comments from, I would say, vicious Christians, which is a hard phrase to say because I don't think that if you're being a true Christian that you're really vicious, but people who would self-identify as Christians who are dead set on believing what they want to believe and have a lot of trouble with any information that isn't aligning or in line with what they want to think about a Christian writer. You mean you can go to any like mega pastor book and they're popular books and they're well sold and they're well publicized and then, a decade later, you realize you've been reading about the prosperity gospel and has nothing to do with Christianity at all. Or, the person who wrote it has had 15 affairs, or
Yes.
that the public perception. So these are all promoted items. They're shoved in our face. They're advertised. There are sales. They rank high on Amazon. And is any of that really real? And I tend to think at this point that a lot of it is not. It's promotion and deception. It's deception by an industry that wants us to believe, and who that's actively promoting occult type books. And boy, the Christian church genre, if you want to put it like that, the ethos of Christianity at this point is so highly infested with occultists. It's it's almost impossible to get around it or to evade it because if they're a popular church, the likelihood of the pastor or the entire, you know, worship team, if you want to put it that way, the likelihood of them not being touched by the occult or directly in it is pretty low. And that's so sad. That is so sad to say. So, what books do you read? I mean, even like going backwards in time, say someone like Charles Spurgeon. There's a lot of people that are doubtful that he wasn't an occultist as well. And we know, like Joseph Smith, the founder of the LDS Church, the amount of witchcraft and Freemasonry, and I mean, his family was they were occult object hunters. That was their job. That's what they did, and they dug up our occult artifacts essentially. So it's everywhere, and it's sad.
It
And I
is.
think I've gotten off topic. I took a a branch off from C.S. Lewis, but yeah, the viciousness with which people want to believe what they want to believe versus accepting that what is presented to us might not be correct is really high.
Well, and I've seen a pattern, especially in Christian authors, where there is the first couple of books or whatever are really good. So I would say, like, there's a lot of really beautiful things in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but you go into his Paralandra space type of thing and you're going, what in the world is going on? And that
Yeah.
feels more occultish. I'll just leave it at that. And then Ted Decker's, his first couple of books, I don't know the order or whatever, but there was 4 books on intercession and intercessors that was fiction that was so gripping and so powerful. It made you want to pray. I mean, and I mean that sounds
Mm,
funny, but then the rest of his material, it was kind of hit and miss, some very dark, some kind of lighter. And then even Frank Peretti. And again, I may be stepping on some toes, but like This Present Darkness was so popular and powerful in Christianity, and the spiritual forces of light versus dark. Um, but then a lot of his other works have traces of the system in it, in
yeah.
occult types of things. And so it seems like they put out some of these, big name people have some really good stuff. And so that kind of makes it legitimate, if you want to say it. People, like, how could Frank Peretti be off? I mean, how could he be an occultist? He did such an amazing job of delineating angels and demons, and so powerfully in these, Christian life.
Yeah.
Um, and so it just seems like a real tactic of the cult, of the enemy, to have some really powerful themes, and yet beyond that, some really questionable types of writings. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. It's like I think everything else they try to do, they really mess with our minds by putting in a, a vast amount of correct material that if you fact check it, you're going to find out that it's most likely true. And then they've got the skewed, like some of the C.S. Lewis arguments that I've seen are just about small. They're small twists of of the gospel. They're small twists of what Jesus said. They're small twists of the truth that when you sum them all up, if just one by one, they're not much. But when you sum them all up, you look at them and you realize, wow, that's a real bastardization of what we're supposed to understand and do. And it was done in tiny little bits here and tiny little bits there that are just stuck in one place after another to fool us, because most of us, when we're reading a book, we're not, when you're reading the book for the first time, you certainly aren't thinking about it as a whole because you don't know what the end is.
Yeah.
And then when you get done, most of us don't go back and think about all the bits, and most of us don't go back and read the book twice and get a second feel for it. And most people don't do what I did with these books that I read, which is go back and read them after a major shift in my understanding of how the world works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we could all do that more. I think if we're more analytical about what we're reading,
Yeah.
and really try to assess, is this true, and not just digest it as. I think that a lot of people do that. They're going to a book for a variety of different reasons, but if you're going to a book like for self help or for spiritual development or for personal growth, you're going to be soaking in that information. And I think that's what we don't want to do now, or at least I don't want to do it. I want to read it with a jaundiced, critical eye, at least the first time through, and test it against what is the truth. Does this mesh up with the scripture? Am I interpreting this correctly? And that takes a long time, and it's not a fun way to do it. So then you can't read the book for fun. Then you have to read the book kind of as an instruction manual that you have a wary eye glanced at. Who wants to do that really? But I think in order to get the most out of any kind of book like that these days, that might be what we have to do.
Yeah.
So maybe the better thing is, instead of going to those books, going to a book written by a pastor, just go to the Bible. There's enough in there to try to understand that we probably could focus more there. I know I can focus more there. Although that
Oh,
said, I really enjoyed the dip that I did outside to try to understand the tribe of Dan, which just brought me back to Genesis over and over and over and over again. And doing that, I understand so much more about Genesis. So much more. It just pops it. It makes it come to life. It makes it real. It makes it mesh with the world these days. And I think that's partly, at least for me, why the Bible is difficult is because it's, 2000 years ago and doesn't really have anything to do with today. And how do I make this relevant in my life today? And, I'm not going to be sitting by the ocean side, dividing loaves and fishes and sitting with my 2000 closest friends, or tribe members there. How does this relate to me in my life today? And I think that's the benefit for me. That has been the benefit for me of trying to understand the occult as it exists in modern day and how it ties directly back to the very beginnings.
definitely.
And it just makes it much more alive. So that's a good way to read a book. That's a good way to bring in the outside sources. So maybe we
Well,
need to narrow our focus of what we read. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe get more choosy about what I read instead of just consuming
yeah.
whatever.
That's the thing, particularly also with reading for entertainment, is that we tend to turn off that filter and just receive it in. And so there's subtle things, even like in C.S. Lewis's, I think it's The Magician's Nephew or something. And I never liked that book, but when I began to learn more about sex magic, I realized that in that book where it talks about the boy and the girl, they put on a ring and it takes them to a different portal, into a different world. And they
Yeah.
have to have the right ring to get back to the right realm and all of that. And when it dawned on me, it was just like, oh my goodness, that is sex magic. That's
Yeah.
basically a manual
Yeah.
for how to do sex magic. And so,
Yeah.
um, and again, when you read it just for entertainment, it's like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why they thought of doing it that way, but that was creative, or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the occult does that more than we realize. I know that in listening to one survivor in particular talk about Michael Aquino's Mind War series, the
yeah,
three books in that series, and also his Fire Force book, which is a Star Wars parody, quote unquote. The amount of embedded information that's actually actionable in there that is astonishing. And if I had read those quote unquote for pleasure, I haven't even read them at all. I'm pretty avoidant of them at this point. But if you had read them for pleasure, you'd be ingesting that
yeah,
actionable information, kind of like what another survivor just revealed about his book, that there are embedded codes in one of the chapters in his book, which surprised me because that was, and I'm not going to name the survivor here, but um, it was surprising to me because that individual was not one that I would have suspected would have done that in his book. And I read his book and didn't catch any of it
yeah.
all the way through. So
I
yeah,
didn't either. I didn't
yeah.
either. But back to what you were saying about scripture, I think this is an interesting thing that was fascinating for me. Is I was, we read the Bible over and over, growing up, but because we don't understand the culture and the occult, how
Hmm.
much the traces of satanic ritual abuse are all through the
Yeah.
scriptures,
Yeah.
and it when you begin to open your eyes to see that, to see, oh, that's why, God needed to uproot the Canaanites out of that land. That's why different things needed to happen, um, because of the occult practices that were going on. It to me brings the clarity of Scripture to light, and much more applicable to today. And even like in the book of Revelation, where the letters to the seven churches, I think there's only one or two of those letters that doesn't have an occult reference to, like Jezebel, the synagogue of Satan, some things like that
Yeah.
that, you know, um, we see in our churches today.
Yeah. In rereading Genesis, which I've been at for a little while now, with a group that I'm working through it with, it's astonishing to me. Again, it's a parallel experience to this pleasure reading series that I've worked through. Um, it's a totally different book. The book of Genesis is a totally different animal. It's a completely different. It's kind of like I have read Dennis Prager started a series. I don't know if he finished it, where he went through the Pentateuch, the first five books of the Old Testament, and he wrote a commentary on them. So I have his Genesis and Exodus commentaries, and I read his commentary, and it's very interesting because it comes from a lay Jewish person perspective. He completely misses all of the occult references,
Really?
every single one of them. And I'm thinking, gosh, yeah, that was me the first time through, right? You can read it, but when you understand that the Old Testament is basically the reason why Jesus had to come is because nothing worked. Everything God did not work to make the evil in the world go away. He tried numerous avenues and numerous solutions, and finally, Jesus was the final solution because nothing else stuck. But so reading it through again and overlaying it with what I now know about how the occult works and who they are and where the bloodlines started, and how to read the names that are so unfamiliar, the
Yes.
demon names that come up, how to understand a spirit. What's a spirit? Why are they communing with spirits? Why are some of the spirits evil? That there are evil spirits, even just basic things like that. It really makes it a whole different ball of wax.
Yes.
It's like living in two different worlds. The world of being completely ignorant is totally different than the world that I'm in now, where I understand. And I am not like a lot of people. I don't want to go back. I don't want to unlearn what I've learned and go back kind of into the womb of safety, as it were, the ignorance is bliss existence. I don't want that. I don't think it was bliss for me. It was very confusing. It was very, like what people said about it was not the way I experienced it. I experienced it as a place that was dangerous because I felt like I didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
And so understanding it call actually brought me a lot of peace. I can feel peaceful about the world, knowing the root cause and
Yes.
that I'm not crazy, that I see the root cause and I can let it be what it is around me, and not be uptight because I don't understand it. So that's a good thing for me. But then, there is this how, we have to adjust. I have to adjust and figure out what the next step is. And how do I live differently? Because you have to live differently. You can't live the same. If the world is different and you're different, then yeah, it's a new way of being in society.
Yeah. And I think part of this is looking for alternatives that are healthy for us, spirit, soul, and body. And so, I know you love gardening, and that's a way of enjoyment. At least I enjoy it when I take the time to do it. Sometimes frustrating,
Yeah,
uh, but it's getting out in nature. It's touching the soil. There's something very healing about that, anyway.
yeah, for sure.
Um, going for walks, being in nature, um, getting together face to face with people, which
Yeah.
is hard to do these days. Most of us, most of our friends are online, at least for me. We have a little bit of a local community here, but a lot of people online. And so, how do we reframe our lives outside of the box the cult wants us to be in?
Hmm.
You know, and it was hard, when I told my ex-husband that I wasn't going to watch TV every night with him. Well, that was something he did every night to help him go to sleep, and to wind down, which, scientifically actually is not. It actually overloads our system. And that's the reason we eventually go to sleep, is it's an overwhelm. It's not a refreshing. We think, oh, well,
Yeah.
I'm just going to zone out or whatever, but it actually is pretty dangerous for us. And it was, probably some of the start of our split. I mean, there was a whole lot of other issues that were long term, but we weren't spending time together. And so it's hard if you have, a spouse who wants to watch TV every night or something like that, because it um, making a different choice is challenging. However, me stepping back from basically all television, all music for a season was really helpful for my healing journey.
Mm.
And it was hard. It was a having to detox from that, and almost like an addiction and a draw. And I have to be aware of it now too. I don't watch all that regularly, but occasionally we'll watch something. But it's one of those things of, let's find other ways of spending our time together. I guess that's
Yeah,
kind of the
for sure.
challenge.
For sure. Yep. Playing cards, playing games, getting outside, doing different things, creating music instead of listening to
Yes,
music.
yes,
These things that we're ingesters. I think these days cell phones have and computers have made us ingesters of content. We almost feel like sometimes I feel like I can't grasp enough bits that I need to grasp for whatever reason, but it also needs to go the opposite way, or for constantly pulling information in and never creating anything. I think that's unhealthy as well.
yeah. There was a statistic I saw recently, and I won't get it right, but it was like basically only 1 in 10 children um, spends any time outdoors these
Mm,
days.
yeah,
And it was like, wow, because it used to be that's what, most of us did, was outdoors.
yeah,
Um, and so even just the loss of creative play, we're losing a lot in our society because of, just gaming, videos, TV, social media, all of these things.
yeah.
So
Wow, that's kind of sad. I hadn't thought
it
about.
is.
Well, I know kids are much more active and on screens and screen time now, but I didn't have that when I was a child either. I was not
Yeah.
I was not a huge outdoor person when I was a kid. I was a much more of a reader than I was.
Yeah.
And but I have vivid and tremendous memories of, you know, splashing around. We had a stream next to our house, so splashing around in the stream and riding my bike down the hill because we lived on a hill. So I learned how to ride a bike by basically sitting on it and just coasting down the hill until I crash,
Oh my.
which was fun for me. I enjoyed that. Um, and the gym equipment and the playground and the flowers. You're laying in the grass and you see the flowers and the grass and the bugs and the you have that connection with the earth that is very it's one of the reasons I think I can sit for hours on the soil and weed.
Yeah.
um and and the time goes by quickly and I don't feel like I'm doing anything necessarily until I get up and I go in and I realize I'm drenched in sweat and heaving from the effort because it's
Oh,
but while I'm doing it, it does soothe the soul and the
yeah.
body. So yeah, I completely agree with that. And also with the, human to human contact because I don't know what kind of a species we're going to morph into if we lose any more human contact than we've already lost. We've
Exactly.
lost so much, and it just seems like it's going to eventually have an effect on us that is going to make us wholly different
Yeah.
kinds of people.
Well, I'm kind of curious. You mentioned Australia's new thing about social media and kids, and
Yeah.
it's having an effect, like you said, on Substack, which might be hurting, you know, you and others. But I'm just curious overall, do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that's a cult thing? Do you think that's, you know?
Well, it's I've got mixed opinions about it. I don't think it's gone into effect just yet. I think it has a couple of weeks before it comes online, or maybe at the new year. So it's imminent. It's on the verge of coming into to being. I know the UK Act. I forget exactly what it's called, but I know that has already started to block out some of my Substacks from people in the UK being able to read them. One of the ones that got blocked out was the Candace Owens
Oh,
um, Faction Wars Substack that
interesting.
I wrote, which apparently at this point you can see on different browsers. So they're still working on it. I'm sure they'll clamp down and knock it out before long. But the Australian one is curious because I have mixed feelings about it. I think it's good.
Yeah.
I think it's good to shield kids um, from some of the really heinous brain manipulation that goes on online. I mean, there's plenty of studies, and I can't quote many of them, but just remembering vague bits and pieces from the ones that I've looked at. Like, you can get really depressed doom scrolling Facebook or TikTok or Twitter or whatnot. We're not designed to just look at piece after piece after piece after piece of information for hours on end.
Mhm.
And I think it's contributing to the lack of kids being able to talk to one another effectively. It's contributing to the more likes I have, the better person that I am, kind of syndrome that a lot of kids have. If they post a picture of themselves and they don't get a certain amount of likes in a certain amount of time, there have been some, negative effects on a number of people, a number of kids for that. And that's just an unhealthy way to live life that, what a personal picture that you post should get, certain number of likes is kind of mind-boggling to me, but it is
Yeah.
what it is at this point. And the amount of inappropriate material online, the things that get covered up, for example, on Facebook that they put age restrictions or content restrictions on, it's really hit and miss. So if you're a kid, you're gonna see a lot of stuff your parents wouldn't want you to see probably anyway, and I certainly wouldn't want them to see. So I have a bit of it. It makes me feel better in a way. It's like maybe they'll have a chance then um, to just to be kids without having the pressure of social media on them. Wouldn't that be nice? At the same time, I realize it's just the start of an entire internet crackdown. So when they can do it to kids, then they're going to start doing it to adults because they can, because they have a precedent, because whatever reason they want to come up with. And pretty soon, what are we going to be able to view on the internet? I mean, this morning I went on and I tried to watch a short by David Schurter, and I got you have not verified your age, so we have age restricted this video on you. I'm like, oh yeah, yeah. And I talked to somebody else about it, and they're like, oh yeah, they've been doing that to me for over a year. Like, okay, great. So how do I age verify? And they have three different ways you can age verify, except none of them work except the upload your 360-degree profile of your face, so we can determine if you are. So I see that as a way for them to start making the internet a place where we cannot anymore gather. So it really bothers me in that sense because if we can't gather on the internet, I'm not sure how that's going to play out in the long run. I think it could be pretty negative. Um, on the flip side, we all want to try to do the things that are good for kids. I can't imagine though that Australian parents wouldn't just be like, "Yeah, I'll make a second account and I'll put it on my kid's phone and I'll, face verify it for myself." And so
Yeah.
I can see a thousand ways that they could probably get around it if they wanted to get around it. Um, So yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a cultural question. It's going to be very. It'll be it'll be fascinating to watch it play out. However it is.
Yeah, that's my thoughts exactly. And we do want to protect kids, but also this is Australia that's doing it. And
Hmm.
when any big governments or UK or whatever are doing things, that it's not motivated out of the kindness of their heart, that there's another
Right.
agenda there. And
There's an author on Substack who wrote an article about it, about what to do. Like a lot of people are saying, "Oh, just get a VPN, a virtual private network, and set it to a different country, and go around the government that way." And he's like, "No, you really shouldn't. You should just stop subscribing because if they lose enough subscribers, Substack will push back against the government. All these online companies will push back and they'll figure out a different solution that maybe works a little better. So that's one way of looking at it. Is I think anytime I'm not a big government person, so anytime we have top down big government control, it always seems to work out badly. It's never what they say it's going to be. It's never the reason behind it never works out to be the reason they want it or the reason they use it in the future. It's always the excuse of the moment to rationalize it to people to then kind of slip in whatever they want to do later on. So I don't like that feeling of being stifled or not being able to choose what I want to watch or choose what I want to view online. It's very frustrating. I mean, that said, we can all do what I'm doing, which is you can put together a private website. They cannot prevent people from viewing on my website that article. If you're subscribed and you go, you know, they can't block any of them out and they can't restrict them because they can't see them. So the reason they're blocking them is because they can, AI read them, quote unquote, and pick out certain words or phrases or whatnot, and then determine that it's part of their no go zone. But they can't do that behind the paywall. So I know the paywall for a lot of people is annoying, and it's annoying for me as well. There are many ways in which it costs me a lot of time and energy trying to figure out, especially when things go wrong or when there are updates. It generally causes havoc with people being able to log in, which is annoying and it takes up a lot of my time. But it is a free speech zone. You can comment freely, you can safely comment, you can discuss what you want to discuss, and you can read without being censored. So in that way, it's good
yeah,
for sure.
well, all these kinds of things we got to process through with true Jesus and walk it out. So how do
Yeah.
we uh, be in the world but not of it? What does
Hmm.
that look like?
Right.
Um, but
Yeah,
it's
it's
good.
a real world modern day grapple for me for sure. How does it look? Where do you draw the line? What do you decide to read or not read? What do you decide to do or not do? What do you decide to eat or not eat, consume in any form, digitally or orally or by a television or even what you grow in the garden? What are you going to eat and plant or not plant? There are more decisions now, I think, than there ever have been.
Definitely, definitely.
So let Jesus make some of them for us, hopefully. Sometimes he doesn't weigh in when I would like him to.
Yeah.
I would like him to weigh in more often. Thank you very much. And sometimes he's just
Oh,
like, whatever. But yeah, for sure.
but anyway, I
So,
think we'll wrap it up there unless you had anything else, Veronica.
nope, nope. Nice
Okay.
talk. Thank you
Yeah, and I just
again. This is for last one for 2025, and
yes.
can't believe 2025 is already gone. Wow. It's been kind of a whirlwind of a year for me.
Oh, and definitely for me. So,
Yeah.
but I just want to bless all of you out there. I know that you may be wrestling with similar issues that we've talked about today. And I hope this has been encouraging to you to prayerfully consider the things that you're engaging with. And let's look for alternatives and creative ways to connect with God, with nature, with one another, especially as we step into 2026. So just want to bless you all. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time on Testimony Mountain.